Welcome everyone to Anything Everything podcast. Today is a special episode. We're happy to welcome Seline Chenoy from the Dreamcatcher podcast and Munir from the Karak with Mahreen podcast. Guys, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're excited to be here. It's turned so formal.
I'll introduce the topic, and then I want to ask you just a quick question in the beginning. Today we're going to be talking about toxic masculinity and toxic femininity, kind of how they tie into each other and what each one is. So my question to each of you, I guess we can start with you, Seline, is what do you define toxic masculinity as? So when you see a man, what traits would he be exhibiting for you to consider him toxic?
So I want to start it by saying that there's nothing toxic about being a man, but there are some men who act in toxic ways. So I see toxic masculinity as any man who displays traits that are harmful to people around them. So I would characterize that as like dominating, aggressive. So they are predatory when it comes to women, and they're disrespectful, they're brutish, they use their power to dominate, to control. So those kind of behaviors are toxic because it's disruptive and it's destructive.
Okay,
Yeah,
Mahreen?
I second that. It's a very similar definition in terms of, I think that toxic masculinity, like masculinity itself inherently is not bad, of course not, but it's just there are certain traits that can be used to harm others that can, so for example, traits like aggressiveness, that can turn violent, and these kinds of things can cause harm to others. I think that's when it gets toxic. But of course, masculinity in itself is not toxic.
Okay, so where's the line? Like, what is masculinity, and when, like, is there, so aggressiveness, for example, like men are known to be more aggressive than women, just in general. But when does aggressiveness of a man cross the line from being, wow, that's masculine, he's just being a man, he's being aggressive, assertive, to the point where it becomes, this man is too aggressive, he's toxic? What do you think where do you think the line is?
I would look at two things. First, his intention. Is his intention to protect, to defend, to, if he fighting for a cause, for instance, a soldier on a battlefield? And I would look at the outcome of his action. Is it resulting in destruction? Is it resulting in harm? So I would look at their intention and the outcome of them, displaying these masculine traits.
I think that even people who are toxic, they still could have the intention of protecting. As in, I think that being toxic is not necessarily aligned with the intention, because you may have the right intention, but the behavior that you're exhibiting is causing harm. I feel like the consequences play a bigger role, because if what you're doing is causing harm to the other person physically, emotionally, it's like emotionally abusive, physically abusive, then that's clearly toxic. I do think that it's important to address the line, because we have overused the term toxic masculinity for scenarios that are not toxic. And
can you give an example?
I think, let me think of an example. I think even when, I don't know, I've heard of these scenarios where when a man wants to pay, I've seen in both scenarios, when a man wants to pay for the bill for the girl, some people think that's toxic, because some girls are like, no, I want to divide the bill. It's toxic that you think as a man you should pay for me. Some people think of the opposite of as toxic, that when you want to divide the bill, they're like, oh, you're not being a man. This is toxicity in a way as well. I think, first of all, even the term toxic does not play a role in any of these scenarios. Correct. It doesn't make any sense. Because it's not causing any harm. It doesn't make sense. And second of all, I think that both of these scenarios are just aligned with confusion in terms of what a masculine man is, but nothing to do with toxicity.
I really like that, because it's coming up a lot nowadays, especially around how do men or act around women and women act around men. In your example, it's about trying to be chivalrous and a traditional masculine man pays for the bill. I think we all agree on that.
Yeah.
And where it's come now is that you don't know how to act as a man. So I think
Yeah. And I blame that on a different subset of women, and I call them elite feminists.
Right.
These are women who are into man bashing and who believe that a man paying for her is kind of making her seem like she's weak or subservient,
Undermining
that she's
her.
undermining her ability to take care of herself. And they think it's a zero-sum game, basically, between both the sexes. And I think that is what's causing men to be so confused about how am I supposed to behave, right?
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do? Because no matter what I do, you seem to call that
Yeah.
toxic. So
There's a saying, speaking of chivalry, it's chivalry is dead, women killed it.
I think so.
that
Yeah.
was Dave Chappelle as well in one of his stand-ups.
He said that?
He said that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not his quote, but he
No,
mentioned it.
yeah,
mentioned it,
it's a quote from the modern times. So what you're saying basically with the elite feminism, because men or masculinity and traditional gender roles now are starting to get bashed, or not starting to, they've been getting bashed for a while, that when a man behaves in what used to be a chivalrous way, it's now starting to be seen as, okay, this is toxic. I can take care of myself. What are you doing? Kind of thing. So, which because for men, we're kind of, I don't know if it's in our biology or in our DNA to be like providers in that sense. It could feel for a lot of men who aren't secure that it's emasculating. And so their reaction is to become more toxic because they feel like they're being attacked. And when you're being attacked, you just get defensive naturally.
Yeah.
People,
Yeah, I mean, think of it. Back in the day, men were the warriors. They were the fighters. They were they protected the family, and the
They
women
went
were
out.
at home taking care of the children,
kids.
cooking.
Yeah.
So it's because of the change in gender roles over time that we have become more confused.
Yeah.
But what does it mean to be a man or a woman? Or
But the problem is, Mahreen, and you all touched on this, is that it's not being acknowledged that these gender roles that are being undermined are what is causing probably the backlash in terms of like the men being in a spot where they seek influencers that are the red pill influencers.
Yeah.
Like we can talk about Andrew Tate, for example, and why a lot of men follow someone like Andrew Tate in today's society. What do you think, Sami, about Andrew Tate?
I mean,
Or about the whole situation?
I mean, the red pill, I've looked into that heavily, at least in the last few years. It caught on during the pandemic. And I think what's happening is that it's a reaction to what I think you said earlier, elite feminism. So what I think is happening, and you said the zero-sum game, is that you have competition that is just, okay, I'm better, no, I'm better. And it's just a wave or a spiral of people just becoming more and more toxic when you shouldn't really compete. And I just wanted to step back a little bit and say, okay, why are we here? Why is it a problem nowadays? Why are we having this debate? And why is the topic of masculinity, toxic, and femininity something so prevalent now? Do you want to touch on the history a little bit?
I think it's because I think it started ever since women entered the workforce. So I feel a lot of them felt compelled to take on more masculine traits to compete with their male counterparts. So they felt that they needed to be more of go-getters. They need to be more dominating in the workplace. And to some extent, I guess that was needed because they were not getting paid as much as men. They were not getting recognized as much as men. So, but I think it got a bit too extreme to the point it bled into other areas of life, our personal life, when it really should have just been contained in the workplace. Women should take off that armor that they wear in the
At
office, and when they go home, I think, my personal opinion, they should get more into their feminine energy because then you won't have that yin and yang, that polarity, because masculine and feminine energy are supposed to complement each other, right?
Yeah.
They're not supposed to compete because we both have our strengths and weaknesses.
100%.
So I think people need to acknowledge that being in your masculine and feminine energy will help you and it will help the other people around you.
I'm not sure if I would say that it was purely because of feminists that this idea of toxic masculinity started, because when I was watching this video about like the history of how masculinity evolved. And even though it was primarily talking about the US, it's still something to think about, because before the Industrial Revolution, she was a professor, she was talking about how men used to work with their families. They used to work at home. They used to work in farms and shops. So the kids, the parents, everyone used to work together. So the fathers spent as much time with their kids as the mothers. So masculinity just naturally became something where you take care of your family because you're with them like almost 24/7. But then when the Industrial Revolution came, these men started leaving the house, started working at factories and all these other jobs, and they spent a lot more time outside, separate from their family. And of course, that's not anything wrong. It's just that gradually, there's a lot of research done on the fact that in the 19th century, that's where like gambling, prostitution, alcoholism, all of these things emerged and increased tremendously. And I think that was one of the reasons, is because those family values that the men had when they were with their families versus as they started separating themselves from their families more and more, that's where that came from. And then women started complaining, and women started saying, oh, these men are changing. Like, they used to take care of us, and now they just think about themselves. And then the reform movement happened, and feminism movements.
Toxic patriarchy started to take a hold of
society. So I think like definitely like feminists played a role in elite feminists played a role in overusing the word toxic masculinity. But in the beginning, when it came about, it was definitely for like the right intentions to prevent like abuse and physical
the Me Too
abuse.
movement, which happened more recently, that was needed, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And just to add to that, and there was a great point that I didn't know that specifically about that period, but it seems that where we are now is we're clashing because of patriarchal institutions. I think we can agree that some of which are by design and some by default have become patriarchal. And then the women's movement, you could almost argue that it had to become toxic to counter such a huge, level of patriarchy.
Fight fire with fire.
Exactly. And then this is where now masculinity is like coming back, like strikes back with more toxicity. And this is where we are, is that we're
Can
just...
you give an example of that?
Yeah,
How was that?
I mean, what Tara was saying earlier, the red pill, you could argue is like a natural, effect to the cause of women having more power, more greater role in society. I heard a gentleman the other day, last week, saying women are taking our jobs. I'm like, seriously? I mean, usually you kind of understand the racist side of it. You know what?
How do you understand the racist side?
You know what I mean? Like when it happens in the States, they say Mexicans are taking our jobs. But when it becomes sexist, you go like, dude, are you seriously? Like, we can compete for jobs. And this is where I think you said it earlier about competition. We don't want to compete on every level.
Of course.
And I think that's what maybe equality is always going to have a losing battle, because we don't need to compete on everything. We can compete for jobs. If we apply for the same job and you're more qualified than me, then go ahead. Yeah. That's how it should be.
Yeah. So like, let's say I am just a below average guy earning below average income. I don't look great. So I don't have any chance with, like, I have like maybe a little bit of chance to get to find a partner or a mate. So right now in today's society, that kind of person who hasn't grown up to have the right social skills and who feels like women in the job market earn as much as him or more, so he doesn't have that advantage in order to find a mate. And usually in most societies, the male is the person that's trying to find the female.
True.
So now they feel like they're competing with men that are much better than them. So they feel like trapped, like there's nowhere, like someone like that would have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So their reaction is to listen to people who they feel will demean women in a sense, because they feel like the women are wrong. Like, why can't I find a mate? No, none of these women want me. No one on Tinder swipes right or left. I don't know which way is the right way, but whatever way is the right way on me. So it's just...
Yeah. Then that's why there's an epidemic of loneliness among younger men. In the West especially. They're feeling misunderstood. They're feeling empty in their lives.
Exactly.
Mental health issues are rampant.
There's
so
like...
it is definitely it's impacting them big time.
And men are more likely to commit suicide as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think mental health plays a huge role. Like it's definitely a factor that we need to consider in when we talk about why men are going into these are finding these others alternative solutions, which is like the red pill communities or
And looking up to figures like Andrew Tate,
Yeah.
who is seen as a poster child for toxic masculinity among certain women. But I think I can understand why he plays such a pivotal role in these young men's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I can see that.
Yeah, he did find a void, essentially, as you were saying, that you have lonely men, you have men that maybe don't have a good father figure, don't have good mentors.
Even Jordan Peterson, even he is pretty popular in that.
In that segment, 100%.
segment.
I mean, he
Yeah.
started as a professor with, shooting all his lessons and,
Yes.
Yeah.
courses online and then sharing them. But he
Yeah.
started
So
as
there is a
clinician.
need for figures like them, obviously. Otherwise, they wouldn't
Yeah,
have
for
become such
sure.
a sensation.
Yeah.
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 There's a gap in the market
There's a
for
gap
that.
in the market.
And he must be, I mean, to be honest, from what I've heard from him, obviously there's the misogynistic side, there's the weird lifestyle that he pushes out. But some of his content, he knows what to say at the right moment to get people on board. Even some women have agreed with certain points.
Yeah.
So he's not entirely, I wouldn't say either good or bad, but it depends
He's
on the
authentic.
context.
That's what I like about him. Even if I don't agree with his opinions, he's authentic. He's confident. He believes in what, in his philosophy.
I don't think he's.
So-
I mean, I'm not going to get into that debate, but I feel like he's narcissistic more than confident, and I don't feel like he's that authentic either. Like he tries to follow the trend, but regardless, the reason him and Jordan Peterson. Would you consider? Do you know Jordan Peterson?
yes.
Would you consider him to be toxic, like a toxic masculine?
No,
I'm a big fan.
I enjoy watching his videos.
Because a lot of women consider him a very toxic
really?
man.
Yeah, I've heard of these, and I don't
Probably
I don't
because
understand.
I lean more towards conservative side, so I don't find him very controversial.
Yeah.
But,
So-
but
but that's
not
just
even
me.
like conservative in like a negative way. Like he is, I think he is the views that, because a lot of people are saying that, oh, he's against feminism, he's against feminists, he doesn't agree with
He
gender
believes in a more
equality.
traditional model of living.
Yeah,
I'll
but
give
even
you
when
that.
you talk about like the
Which-
workplace and
yeah.
things along those lines, when I watch his videos, he talks a lot about how it's true that there may be a gender pay gap, but it's not all of it is because of your gender. Like even
Right.
if there's a pay gap, it's not all of it because of your gender per se. It has there are other causes for it, like some traits like agreeableness and things like that. So I think people just watch like one segment of what he's saying, which is that, oh, a pay gap exists, but it's not because you're a woman, and then they get mad. But when you dig in, what he's saying is actually making sense. So I don't see him as toxic or anything.
He's
like that.
controversial. I think that's a better word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more political, really driven than
He's
than-
politically driven now. Yes.
than misogynistic. The thing is, and he's spoken about this in terms of at least access to jobs, and this is where I think equality has come a long way, which is a good thing. Is that even when you need to present options for both genders to take a stab at what they would like in life, because you can't. I don't think we can divide and say these are only purely women jobs and men jobs, but what he said. In countries like Scandinavia is that even when you give women certain, I think you've heard of this, certain opportunities, they tend to go to other jobs that are more socially driven rather than the engineering, the science, the technology.
More in the medical field, nursing. Yeah.
And Scandinavian countries, I mean, it's as equal as it can get.
So for a male to be a male, there are specific traits that a male has to have for them to be identified as a male.
Yeah. He has more masculine traits,
Generally, yeah.
generally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Generally.
Yeah.
Because there are some people that say that these masculine traits are the problem, that they're the toxic masculinity.
people-
Like I
say
said,
that.
yeah.
Because you're separating them and assigning specific traits to women and specific traits to men, that's toxic, right? Like a woman can have the masculine traits and still be a woman.
Yeah, you get strong.
I mean, there's a balance, right?
Yeah.
Because we all have those traits within us.
For
yes.
You know, no one is fully 100% masculine on a report.
Yeah, I've
right?
seen you
Yes.
wear that dress the other day.
Like if
Really?
you
Oh, I
look,
didn't know.
like if you look at like goddesses, like goddess energy,
Yeah.
some of them do have pretty strong masculine traits in them, but
Yeah,
that
the
doesn't
confidence. Yeah.
The goddesses?
like goddesses, like you
Like
know,
the Hindu goddesses?
like all
or-
kinds of Greek
Okay,
goddesses. They do
Okay.
have certain level of masculine traits in them for them to be so strong and courageous in
But that's the problem.
Yeah,
That's the problem. When you say that strong is a masculine
Is
trait,
only a
I'm not
sign.
saying it's my problem. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that society views it as a problem.
Yeah.
When you say that a woman being strong means they're exhibiting a masculine
Okay,
trait.
resilient. I think that's a better word.
Women are very resilient.
comes
Like
back
it's
to
also a
language.
feminine trait, in
Comes
my
back to
opinion.
language.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it's a matter of semantics.
I think it's how would you define masculine traits? Like what traits do we think are I wanted to ask you guys, how would you define masculinity in general as well?
For me, masculinity has to cover, I mean, the husband definition, in a sense, has the provider in the definition. So that's number one, masculine. Strength is masculine because biologically, males are stronger than women on average, obviously. Maybe more in tune with emotions. I don't want to say like repressed emotions, but more in tune with emotions.
Like manages emotions
Yeah,
well?
ability to take decisions, decisiveness, I think is a masculine trait. So that's how I see it. What about you?
the thing with me, I don't see, like, masculinity is a very abstract term. I don't have specific traits that would define masculinity. For me, male should be secure, confident, and able to give safety to another human if that human needs it. But that doesn't mean that a woman can't exhibit those traits. I wouldn't call them masculine traits. I would call them traits that men should have and women can have. Like, it's not, there are different, so it's like a spectrum. Like, you can be
Yeah.
Fine.
someone who identifies as a man but is much more in touch with your sensitive and emotional
Yeah,
side.
and I think culture also plays a role in it, don't you think? Because I
For
feel like
sure.
there are more masculine men in the Middle East.
So the problem with the Middle
compared-
Eastern view and
Yes.
what
There we go.
creates toxicity is that men are bred not to show emotion.
Yeah.
And that is actually
That's
a form of toxic masculinity.
That's an extreme.
That is.
Yeah,
It is
And
an
what
Yeah.
it comes out as is aggression.
exactly.
You can't show that you're sad. You can't show that you're afraid. You bottle all those emotions
Be a
up and you start
man.
exploding
Stop
in
crying.
rage. Yeah.
So do you think you would
Stop
not associate any?
Yeah,
But that's true. Boys
100%.
don't cry.
Boys don't cry.
Yeah.
Don't show your emotions.
And then Fergie said big
Especially
girls
old
don't
school.
cry, which is
Oh yeah, I saw.
Like men in my father's generation, like I haven't seen my dad cry,
yeah, same. Yeah.
which is, I guess, a good thing. But
I don't know. Is it a good thing?
I don't know
I
if
don't
that's a
know.
good thing.
it's
I don't
like
know.
that generation, they don't like to show their weaknesses. They don't
Okay.
like to be vulnerable.
So let me
Exactly.
be
which
controversial.
is sad because you're a human being. You have feelings.
I
Just
think that's.
because-
I personally think that's problematic, and it
I
can
think so.
lead to toxicity.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm gonna just be devil's advocate. So this is what some of the red pills say, is that I don't think there's anything wrong per se with a man crying or your father showing emotion, but this is where they go maybe on a tangent and they say if a man cries in front of his wife, slowly but surely she's gonna lose respect for him. She won't see him in the same light, and that can maybe lead to a bad relationship or things unraveling. So what's your counter to that? This is how they see
so
it.
then how would a man show vulnerability? Like how would you show vulnerability?
I think for
Oh no,
a
I've
woman,
cried. I'll say it. No issues there.
I'm never vulnerable. I'm like Superman. No, I've cried in front of my wife, and
Yeah.
she hugged me and consoled.
But what
me.
about when
Like,
you're
it's-
amongst your guy friends? Do you get weirded out if someone
Yeah.
is a
Oh, yeah, that's a
bit
good
like if
question.
I'm chilling with Sammy and he
sentimental?
starts
It's like,
crying to
dude,
me,
what's wrong?
I'll
Would you
get
feel
weirded
awkward?
out.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened yet. I
It
don't know.
hasn't happened, but like, how would
Let's
you
see.
feel if we're chilling?
If you're among men, right?
yeah,
Like,
if we're
No, but-
chilling and I start crying,
of
like, wouldn't you feel
dudes.
weird?
I mean, thinking of it now, I'd probably go like, okay, there's something like serious, for you to just, because you went from like zero to.
But how would you
whatever.
react?
I'm not gonna
you're
just
more
be-
in touch with. He's
know what I
more
mean?
in touch with
Yeah,
his
because I'm not-
empathetic side.
No,
I'm
but
not
how
gonna-
would you react though?
I mean, first
would
of
you
all,
feel
yeah,
uncomfortable?
Like
I
if
don't
I
think
said, have we
uncomfortable.
ever sat down and talked to each other about our deep issues and
I don't
problems?
think so. No. Maybe we should, and you go on the other side.
See, that's the thing with men, right? Like we don't usually share this.
We're not
shit.
used to that. We're
yeah,
not
because
raised
you're
to do that.
socialized.
But would you
that way.
want to have that space to talk about these things? Talk about your emotions?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's there, and it depends on certain people. I think every guy has maybe one or two people that they can really confine in.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And I think with women maybe it's like double the number, generally. I think that there's a
That's
ratio in
true.
society almost.
Yeah.
If a guy has two, woman has four.
Yeah.
But
Something
there are
like
some guys that, so the problem that creates toxicity, or part of the problem, is that there are guys that don't have anyone that they do that with.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
Because
think
me and Sammy, I feel like we're much more progressive males than a lot of males in our society. I mean, a lot of men never show that weakness, even in front of their wives or in front of their...
Yeah.
If they need to cry, maybe they go sit in a room and just cry by themselves. I don't know what they do. Like, how could you just bottle everything up like that?
It's
also
very
tied-
unhealthy, actually.
Yeah.
That's why like these things arise. What we're talking about, loneliness, like these suicidal thoughts, and all of those things. So I think that toxic masculinity, when we use the term toxic masculinity in the realm of vulnerability and not showing your emotions, that for me that can be seen toxic. And I feel like that was one of the reasons when toxic masculinity initially was used by psychologists. When the term was coined, it was in regards to vulnerability and showing your emotions. So that for sure is toxic. And there was something else I wanted to say.
That's fine.
So what about, like women, when they're viewing men and when they consider a man exhibiting toxic behavior, you remembered what you want to say?
Yeah.
Say it.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I wanted to respond to what you were saying, because you were saying that if a man cries in front of his wife, and would we not build a good... I feel like women, when we see a man or someone close to us cry in front of us, we build a deeper connection with that person. So for me, I don't see that as something that would kind of deteriorate my relationship with that person. Of course, if we're being honest, like the frequency in which someone cries matters.
Yeah.
I was going to say.
Not just with a man, with anyone, but of course, perhaps a little more with the man, because you do think of a man as someone who is kind of taking care of you. But for me, I've seen my father cry maybe like once or twice in my life, and that was such a like emotional moment for me, but also like it really made me connect with my father like 10 times more. So I really do think it helps in a relationship.
It leads to what I was saying, in that there are women now that when a man displays these, even today, when a man displays these vulnerable states, they feel like that's not a man that I want to be with. Like, he can't provide me with the safety that I need. So they cause toxic behavior to keep increasing. And at the same time, they expect all the equality in the workplace and all of that. So there's a bit of I feel like a dissonance in the way people are seeing things. Like, a lot of women and men, they expect, for example, women that expect the man to take care of them and to be there for them and to provide for them. But at the same time, they want to be seen as equal in every single other way. So that is, what is, like...
So you think that's becoming toxic now? Maybe let's flip it to
It's creating an imbalance. I feel like it's creating an imbalance. If a woman expects the man to be providing for them and to be there for them and earn more than them and give them stuff, but at the same time, they want to be equal in every other way of the relationship, where's the give and take? Where's the balance? And the absence of that balance, I feel like, causes also issues and brings out the toxic side of men.
Yeah, I think that's where self-awareness comes into the picture. It's about knowing what you want in a partnership and being mature enough to communicate that to the person that you're with. So these are my expectations and this is what I can offer. Can we work with this?
But the conversations now that are happening...
The conflict happens when you aren't clear about who you are and what you want, and you don't know what you're expecting the other person to do in the household. So I think it begins with self-awareness and good communication between the two people, and that can avoid all the conflict.
Yeah, I think every family dynamic is different. It really depends on...
There's no right or wrong.
Yeah, it depends on like what a person wants. And like for me, particularly, I do want to work. I want to earn for myself. I talk a lot about financial independence for women a lot. And but I also say that when I'm with a man, when I get married, I do want my husband to... I don't want my husband to earn like 10 times more than me. I think we talked about this more because I don't want someone who has so much money that they think that they can control me in a way, because money does equate power, especially in our society. So for me personally, I would not want to be with a man who earns so much more than me that they, because of that, they make all the decisions and I just have to follow them. I don't like that idea. And even if it's not intentional, I think that can happen in a relationship when the man earns a lot
It
more.
does. It will.
Yeah.
I think it will happen.
And it's embedded in the red pill thinking, is that make money, they push men to a certain, this is where I think it's a bit of a tricky one and a slippery slope. They're pushing men to become the best version of themselves, but towards an outcome or a consequence where they can dominate women.
Yeah.
And they just
Yeah.
want women to be submissive.
Yeah,
And
Subservient, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just say, it also goes beyond like the earning capacity and the earning power. For me, it's also about, does this man have self-control? Can he be loyal to me? Is there going to be fidelity in our relationship? Because to me, a man who's a womanizer, who's predatorial, who does not respect women, that's very toxic.
No, absolutely.
So I'm also thinking about that when I'm with somebody, because for me, as a woman or someone in their feminine energy, for me, that's safety. For
Yeah.
me, that's love. For me, that's care. So
So what causes behaviors of a man being like disloyal, of being that kind
low
of toxic,
self-esteem,
aggressive?
low self-esteem,
Insecurity.
insecurity, not feeling good enough. He needs validation from other women.
Poor mentors as well.
Yeah, and I feel
poor
that goes
idols.
both ways.
Yeah.
Even women who are, not loyal, they also seek male attention for that reason outside of a committed relationship.
So it stems
And-
from a lack of confidence
I think so.
or security.
Yeah, insecurity,
Makes
not filling that void with other people's attention or even addictions for that matter.
Yeah.
You know?
Let me address two of the toxic sides as well. Is that what we've discussed a little bit? Is that when the males become toxic, they become womanizers. They become seeing everyone like a
Yeah, you're Harry Weinstein.
you have a price, right?
Jeffrey
You have-
Objectify.
Epstein.
Everyone
Yeah.
can be
You
bought.
objectify women.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
but they still, in a sense, they know they need women in their lives, but their view of them is skewed and you know.
And that's very toxic.
Very-
to
very
me.
toxic.
That bothers me a lot.
Now the
when
other side of it is that
men-
when there's toxic femininity,
Yeah.
what I've seen and heard is that they start to say, "I don't need a man." So this is where again both sides are wrong.
And usually those are women who are hurt, who's had bad
Yeah.
experiences.
100%.
And who've taken on so many like masculine traits that they cannot create that
Yeah.
polarity between
Yeah,
with them and a man.
and it's not all men
anymore.
like this, obviously.
Yeah,
it's
I've,
just
I've had like some friends who unfortunately got divorced, and because of those bad experiences that they had with men afterwards, when we talk to them, they just say, "Oh, like I don't need a man in my life. Like I'm happy the way I am.
Yeah.
I don't want to get married again." And I definitely understand where that comes from. It comes from this
Self-protection.
self-protection after those bad experiences. But I also see it, other women saying it from a different intention, where they're saying it in a way where all men are bad and I don't want to ever be with a man in my life because I can earn for myself. And I don't see anything wrong with being financially independent as a woman. I think that's really important. But just the idea that you push all men away, that
To me,
that
that's
can
saying
create
I am
toxicity.
so freaking scared of getting hurt again.
yeah, and
But do
look,
you think that's toxic?
I don't think it's toxic. She's just harming herself. She's preventing herself from having a potentially beautiful experience.
But do you think that there are women who say it in a toxic, with a toxic intention?
If they're posting like TikTok videos where they're saying all men are evil, all men
Yeah,
are bastards,
that's what I mean.
That is toxic.
Yeah.
and
But you have to process those feelings and go deeper and be like, okay, what's happening here? Because your feelings are your responsibility. You have to have that hygiene to kind of, that emotional hygiene to really regulate what's going on inside you, rather than spewing venom online, which a lot of women are now,
100%. And look, to look at it differently a little bit, is that if that person, maybe she's happy, maybe she's fine with saying, I don't need a man. And that's her choice, right? Everybody has a choice in life. But I think where it becomes toxic is when you tell women, all men are like this. If you're advising women to avoid men, they let them experience it.
and
Give
some
them
women
advice.
are doing that.
But don't tell them to
Chelsea
avoid
Handler
men.
is one
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
She's
So I feel like there's another side to toxic femininity as well, and it's the women who expect both worlds. So they expect to be treated completely equally by the man, to the man, and they expect the man to be the main provider. Do you think that's actually problematic? So if I were to ask women, like, would you want to be with a man who earns more money than you? I think that more often than not, a woman would say yes. They would prefer that just because it gives them that safety. Well, not you. You're probably not common. But would it?
Well,
That's a
thank
good
you.
thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah. But I feel like a lot of women would want that
Would
safety
want
of
the
a man to earn more than them and to be able to provide in
But
case
they have to be
don't.
aware of the power dynamics that is going to
Yeah,
create.
But that's exactly what I'm
and
saying.
be
So
okay
there are.
with how that's going to play out for them.
So that's the problem because these women are not okay with the power dynamic that results from having that belief. So they have both beliefs in their head. They want to be completely equal. They want the man to be the provider and
Equal in what way, though?
It's a good,
Yeah,
good
because
question.
I was gonna say that, for example, I can talk about my parents. My dad is the main provider of the household. My mom, she's the housewife.
Okay.
And when I say that, I would want my father and my mom to be equal, I say it with respect. Like, I want to equally respect my mom and my dad because I believe they both deserve equal respect.
Right.
Even if one is earning more than the other. I think in that sense, equality is important.
100%. What the way I was thinking about it and mentioning it is that, for example, the man is earning the money, the woman is at home and not working, but she still expects household chores to be split evenly, for example, or for people to, if they have a kid, for them to split their time taking care of the kid. I do believe that the father needs to take care of the kid as well. But if the mother is at home and not working and the man is providing the money, then the mother should also provide. So what you're saying is right. Like, there should be a mutual respect, 100%. But if the man is the provider and the woman expects the man to be the provider, she needs to expect to take on the
she's also
traditional
doing a
gender
job.
role.
She is.
She's also doing a job.
that's what I'm
Taking
saying.
care of kids, cooking, that's hard work.
Yeah.
What she needs to, the thing is, she needs to be
It's
doing
just
those
not,
things.
she's just not monetizing it. But that
Yeah.
takes energy, it takes effort, it takes the same amount.
Right, but
just
not all women do those things. So they expect the man to also help them do those things. So they don't accept the role of a housewife, even though they expect the man to be the provider.
But who are you talking about? Do you have any stats on this? Because it feels like,
That's so.
yeah. Is
know,
this a common occurrence? Where
Not in the Arab world, but this is
yeah.
kind of what's becoming sort of more trendy.
I think that there's nothing wrong with asking for help. I do agree that if a man is the sole provider of the house, he's working outside, the woman would work at home. She would be cleaning, cooking, she would be taking care of the kids. But there are certain responsibilities that even the man need to take up at home. Like, for example, some aspects of taking care of the child, the man needs to do as well. Sometimes asking help from the husband if the dishes aren't cleaned, and sometimes you need help if it's been a long day, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking
100%.
for such kind of assistance.
But good communication is key here.
And yeah,
It comes back to that. And I really think there's a problem with how we look at the power dynamics. Maybe people obsess a bit too much on this, is that if I'm making more money, I need to be the CEO of the house. I don't think it's like that. It's way more, as you said, more agreement, communication.
That's how abuse happens at home, by the
Yeah,
way. Like,
it's not a job that you're signing up for as a wife in that sense.
Yeah.
But we're taking
That
the
sense of
business
ownership.
mindset to the home when it shouldn't be. It should be that, okay, can you help out by doing the dishes? I don't think sometimes women would say, I don't even need to ask you, in a way. So that's where it shouldn't be like tit for tat, or you did it 50 times, I'm doing 51.
Yeah,
we don't need
yeah.
a spreadsheet and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So it's a partnership where we both do more and expect less, in a way.
But the man has to
It's
be a
not
bit
easy.
empathetic. Say again, he has to tap
100%.
into his feminine side to understand, okay, she's
100%.
been working all day. Let me try to help her out with the household tasks and ask her if she needs my assistance. So
100%, yeah.
yeah.
I think that comes with the territory, as if you want a man that makes more, stronger than you, much more confident, then he can carry more in terms of the emotional
Yes.
and the support.
Yeah.
So that's where it balances in a way, because while we know that biologically we're not equal, we're different, but then these differences come out later when a man can shoulder more. So you have to be a bit more understanding, I feel. And
I think there's this idea that when a man comes home, that's when the woman's work starts. But that's not true. The woman has been working the entire
I think there's an
day.
ad in the 1960s where they show that, where a woman is like, cleaning up and getting ready for her husband, wearing new clothes and getting ready to greet him at the door, with a hot beverage. Yeah, there is an ad from the 1960s. It's on YouTube.
There's probably
if you
lots
look
of
it up.
ads like that.
we're so influenced by this. That's the problem.
But isn't that
Yeah.
okay if the woman is fine with it?
I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it has to be
hey,
conscious. It has to be communicated. It's
as
not
long
like sign a
as
contract and
they're not
Yeah.
resenting it and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
choose that path, go for it.
Yeah, honestly, I completely
Exactly.
think that. So I was just saying that that you should not think that when a man comes home, that's when the woman's work starts, because she's been working the rest of the day. So when she asks for help after you've come home, you're also done working. She also worked for the rest of the day. So now
Yeah.
you can help each other. I think that's where the help is important.
Yeah.
I think one of the main problems as well, going back to kind of the biological differences, is that when we look at it between like individuals like ourselves, they don't show as much. But when we scale them to millions and billions, that's when we see the differences really come out. So I think we forget that at times.
What do you mean?
Is that the differences are percentages between us now because we're a small number. But when you scale and look at society or millions of men, millions of women, that's when it really shows, and we go like, oh my God, we're so different. But on an individual level, we're not in that sense, not so much. And we kind of think that different means better or worse. I think that's a bias. Different is just different. It doesn't need to be I'm better, I'm stronger. It's just you do things differently.
Yeah.
You know, so I kind of trying to think
So
about this more
approach it
now.
from a place of curiosity versus judgment, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
And there's no contract, there's no KPIs. Like, you come home, you have to tick the box.
Yeah.
And things
I
like
think
that.
when we get too married to the whole gender roles that we are raised to believe in, that's when it starts getting tricky, right?
What do you mean?
We're not willing to deviate from what we believe a man and a woman should do in a household or in any situation.
Like
then that becomes-
traditional gender roles.
It's
traditional-
not fixed. It's not
if
fixed.
we're
for
very
sure.
if we have a very fixed mindset, I'm sure you met these traditional men who were like, no, women have to do this and
Yeah.
you can't do that, you can't wear those clothes, you can't go out after 8 o'clock in the night. So it's like when you're very stringent in your ways and not willing to be flexible and open to different ways of seeing a man and a woman's role, then it's a problem.
Okay, then here's a question that maybe might come up and could be perceived as toxic. If a man asks his woman about what she's wearing, because this comes up in the Arab world, and says, okay, I'd prefer if you don't wear that dress, or so on. So how would you look at it? What is the approachable or acceptable way?
So
for
what is
that?
the reason behind him saying that?
That's a good question. It could be that I just, as a man, let's say it's me, I'll say, I don't want other men to stare at you because, this dress is, so and so. So how would you perceive
So he's
that?
not saying it is, you're my woman and you can't wear that. Right?
It depends on the
he's not
language.
objectifying
What was that
her.
accent, though?
Depends on the language.
But he kind
No,
of
but
is.
she's his wife. He can't objectify his wife.
He kind of is.
No, he
but
can't.
No,
Yeah.
I don't.
He
Oh, he
actually
can't?
can't objectify her.
What
He
do you
can
mean- okay, what do you mean by
request her-
objectify
He can
her?
request her, as my partner, I'd prefer that you not wear that because
Okay.
it's a reflection of me and our relationship.
Okay.
And I would prefer if you wear something a bit more respectful.
Okay.
For me, it's just that.
Okay. So that's
Just
the
that.
language. It's the
So
language.
you're giving her an element of choice. You're not demanding her to do what you want her to do.
Okay.
Very different
Okay.
tones.
That does make sense. For me, it's just that if a man chooses to be with a woman, a man already knows the kind of clothes she wears. Like if she's promiscuous, if she wears, tight clothing, if she wears modest clothing, like the woman is already showing you who she is.
True.
And so it's just that when you're together, like before you were okay, like when you were dating it was okay, and then when you get married, now suddenly it's an issue what you're wearing. I don't agree with that. Like the woman, that was how she was. I don't understand why that you were okay with that before and now you're not.
True.
If it comes from a sense that the place that we're going to is more modest, or it would be disrespectful if you wear this there, or like for example, for me, I feel like I wear modest clothing. I don't wear anything that is too revealing. When I go to Pakistan, I wear even more, like I don't wear jeans, for example.
Okay.
And so if someone tells me, like if my dad or anyone tells me not to wear jeans in Pakistan, for me, that would make sense because that's just culture there. So if it comes from that intention, I understand.
Okay.
But if you're trying to change the type of clothes she's wearing, even though that's just who
Yeah.
you knew that's the type of clothing she wears, and now you're changing it, I don't understand that.
Okay.
Intention matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
And be
100%.
respectful
And
of
the language.
anything those are markers of her identity. Be
Mm-hmm.
sensitive to that. And if her clothing is part of that, then just respect it.
I think it's just
Yeah.
at least in the early stages of dating and getting to know someone, it's hard as well to you have beer goggles.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think men they're not as honest. I think at times they don't say that they don't speak their mind. Put it that
Yes.
way, and they're caught up in the the wave and the chemical reactions and love and all that kind of stuff. So they slip for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
That's why the the process has to be longer.
Okay.
Don't jump into it too quickly because you have to observe people's patterns and
Yeah.
100%.
True.
and be like,
100%.
okay, am I okay with that? Because you got to see what they're like when they're nuts, when they're crazy.
Yeah, but that's the thing because this
You have
is
to
how
see their shadow side, as I like
You
to
really
call
do, you
it,
have to
because we
see-
all have a shadow side.
you
Right?
don't really know someone till
Yeah.
you like
True.
lived with them,
Yeah.
traveled with them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Get stuck in an airport
what
for
are they
3
like when
hours, you
they're-
figure them out.
Yeah. What are they like when they're very
Airport test.
irritable and when they don't get their way? I want to see that inner child. So
Okay.
Yeah. Do you think Arab men, the traditional cultural Arab man, is it a toxic way of viewing a man? Because in the West, if you talk about what a traditional Arab man does, I think most people would think that that's toxic.
So let's
it's a
define.
It's a stereotype, though. What are they going by?
Yeah.
So they're going by how paternal Arab society is. Like in general, in the Arab world, men are much more like in the workplace, women are much more traditionally in the house most of the time. So this, in the Western sense, sometimes can be seen as a lack of equality between men and women. Like the men are the ones that work, the women don't. In the Muslim religion, a man can marry 4 women and not
But
be with-
there's an asterisk. It's not open, ended. At
Sure.
least,
If you
there
treat
are
them
strong
equal.
caveats. And
Okay,
just
strong
to,
caveats maybe
Yeah.
for you, but maybe for
No, I think
other men
even-
like to
even
exploit
religiously.
that, right?
Yeah, religiously, it's
Right?
true that it's not just that you can marry 4
Yeah,
wives.
you're not off the
there's
shelf.
conditions of
Off
it
the
that people.
Yeah.
Sure, but like that's what I meant. Like that's sort of
It's abused.
yeah, but there's also the view from the West that this is toxic behavior. Would you agree, or is it just does culture define toxicity? What is because perspective matters.
Well, they're judging them based on their own template, right?
Yeah.
Of
Exactly.
what a masculinity is.
Yeah.
So they have no right to say what's right and wrong.
Okay.
So if it works for a particular Arab household, then I don't think it's a problem.
But how do we know that it's working? Like how do we know that these
So
women
we'll have to dig deeper. I think it's very personal. It'll vary from person to person.
It's not just Arab culture. I think it would be aligned with Pakistani
Yeah,
Yeah.
Asian cultures where the
Indian.
man
Yeah.
works, the woman stays at home, and this has been the case culturally for long periods of time, and it's worked. It has also not worked. The cases where it's not worked is when the man is. As we were mentioning before, dominating the woman
Abusing.
when he abuses the woman, all of those things. I think that does happen. That's completely wrong. But there are so many instances where it's worked. I think that generalizing those incidents to the whole society, I think that's what West does, which is completely wrong.
Yeah, I think no matter where you're from, you should get curious if they're doing things a different way. Just be like, why do you do that? Like, I just get into their mind and see what's going on there.
So, I mean, there are, like you mentioned before, that if there's a very distinct power dynamic between the man and the woman, you wouldn't like that, right? Like the man is earning 10 times more. But traditionally in Arab society, the man is earning not just 10 times more, all the money. So there is going to be that imbalance at home. And also because the man is working, if they have their own company or whatever they're doing, they're probably not going to be at home as much, right? Which, like as a woman, do you think there are some women who find that completely okay and they're 100% fine sitting at home, not being independent?
I know a lot of women, actually, a lot of my friends who don't want to work, who want to stay at home, who want to take care of the house mostly, and I think that's completely okay. And I think that is common. Like
It is
it's still
common. It's
commonplace,
still
even
common.
though a lot of women are working these days. But for me personally, I still see that a lot. And if it's coming from them personally, making the decision that they want to stay home, it's completely okay. If it's coming from like the family saying that no, you should stay at home, or things like that, then it's
Then it's a problem.
that's
But
wrong.
don't you think a lot of women face that societal pressure where they're like, they want to break free, but they're contained by the culture that they're in?
I think that's changing, but for sure, like when we talk about Pakistani cultures, even like when we look into Pakistani expats, I think it's different. People who've gone abroad, Pakistanis I've met in the UAE, most girls, most parents encourage them to work, to study, all
I
of
think
those things.
so.
I can speak from Lahore, which is one city in Pakistan, because that's mostly what I've seen, is that parents there are also encourage their daughters to go abroad and study, to work. It's slowly changing.
Yeah.
It's maybe not at the pace that we would want, which I've talked about before, but it is still changing.
So you do feel like there's a bit of toxicity in the traditional culture?
Oh yeah, I think that's in all cultures though. Like in all cultures, you can find some level of toxicity.
I was aware of this since I was a kid. Like I grew up watching these Disney movies where the women were stuck in a mold, like the Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
She was not allowed to
Yeah.
go and see
Yeah.
the humans, and Princess Jasmine was not allowed to. So I kind of grew up seeing that and saying that, these women said that was not okay, and they took a stand for themselves, and they, they went for their dreams. They fought against all these forces that were against them being in their power, so to speak. So I grew up seeing that, and that definitely left an impression on me. And it had a pretty big impact on my value system as a woman and how I conduct myself. And I thank Disney for that, actually.
So I have a question.
Because that's not what I saw in the Indian culture. I grew up with an old, my father's a bit old school, but he's not as bad as other Indian fathers. But, I definitely feel like I could push back because I grew up with that influence.
Okay.
And I knew that there was a different way of being as a girl, as a woman.
yeah.
So pop culture definitely has an impact.
You know what I
on-
think is a good example as well,
Yeah.
because I've seen someone talk about this.
Yeah.
The movie Mulan.
Oh, I love that movie.
The
Mulan's a
original,
great
the
movie.
cartoon.
Yeah.
Well, she takes on a more masculine trait there. She actually literally
She
dresses
combines-
up as a
I
man.
think
She
she takes
disguises herself
both
as a man.
the best of masculine and femininity as
Absolutely.
well. Because they showed, and obviously it's a story, I don't know if it's true,
Mm-hmm.
but the way they've written the character is that she, from the very beginning, starts off as someone that's a bit innovative, that's creative, and her traits help her later on in life.
Absolutely.
Despite having to take on a masculine role. So it's not the masculinity
But
part
and
that...
she was ridiculed in the village. They were like, they're sending the
Exactly.
matchmaker and be like, hey,
Yeah.
why aren't you becoming more like,
Yeah.
you need to please the matchmaker, bring a cup
100%.
of tea, or
100%.
and she was terrible at it.
Yeah, she's
So-
like in the wrong sort of like society, and
Yes.
they wanted her to conform, but then celebrated the femininity and her own unique way of
Yes.
approaching life
Yeah.
to win. And
That movie's a masterpiece, actually, from that from
It's a
that
great movie.
perspective.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a celebration of femininity. I think that.
I think
movie.
so, and yeah.
And equality. Seline, I have a question.
Yeah.
Because you have like strong opinions about women equality, that they should work, and do you feel like you have trouble finding a partner, a man, because of that? Do you feel like men feel emasculated when you want to be very independent because they want to be controlling, especially here in Dubai?
Well, I feel that a lot of men that I meet feel intimidated by me because of my intelligence, and that they feel like I can psychoanalyze them.
Okay.
So I don't know if that touches on the masculine, feminine, aspect.
You don't
but-
think it's because it's your independence
And
more
I
than
tend
your
to be more in my masculine energy in the sense that I don't show a lot of emotions initially, and that kind of trips them up a little bit.
Okay.
Because I'm more analytical. I'm more of an observer in the beginning, and I think that would be considered more stoic, more masculine. So they get a bit thrown off by that.
You don't strike me as a submissive type. Like you're not submissive, subservient, and that is a trait.
I was
that-
more rebellious in the beginning, but I've learned to temper that down and add more femininity in my makeup, because
Okay.
without it, I think it creates a lot of clash with the opposite sex.
Right, because I feel like a lot of men really look for that. Like they want the woman to be submissive.
Yeah, so it's about finding a balance, right? You can be both, like a Michelle Obama. She's got a lot of masculine traits, but she also tempers that with feminine energy, her
Right.
nurturing, caring side. So having good role models like that really helped me and
But
learn.
is it
because
toxic
I
for-
was also thinking that being feminine was weak earlier.
Do you
That's the
equate
part.
and
femininity?
I
Yeah.
realized that it's not being kind, being empathetic, caring, family oriented. Does not. It's not.
It's not weak at all.
It's
I
not weak at
completely
all.
agree.
But none of
It's
that is
not weak at all, and a lot of
submissiveness.
women think that they throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So
Sure.
you shouldn't do that.
But that's not necessarily submissive. Submissive. Those traits you mentioned.
No, being kind. Like the other day, I was at a 50 Cent concert, and the
Were you
Very
in the
masculine.
club?
so we were waiting outside for 2 hours. The concert started out late, and I saw this girl with her friends, and a guy kind of just brushed against her because it was a stampede to get inside once the doors were open, and he just kind of brushed against her, and she started hitting him,
Oh wow.
like punching the guy. How dare you?
So that,
And then the
that's
guy,
toxic.
he didn't know,
That's
he didn't do
wild.
anything, and she
Definitely
continued
toxic.
screaming at him as she walked away, and her friends
my
were
God,
pulling her
that's
back.
excessive.
I'm like, what has happened to women these days? She was probably in her early 20s, and the poor guy obviously didn't do anything. He would not hit a woman, right? And he was so confused. He's like, "What did I do? What did I do?" So
Yeah,
that's
this happened to me as well when-
that is an example of
Yeah.
toxic feminine
100%.
energy.
Yeah.
I'm
Happened
like,
to you as well? Were you punching the guy?
No, I was.
I'm
just
joking.
tell him, look, please be careful about where you're going. That's all you need to say.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not like he was being perverted or trying to touch her in an inappropriate
Like
way.
he just brushed
He
against her
just
to
brushed
go
against because it was like we were like in a
It was
tuna
such a
can, right?
tight-
It was
Yeah.
so tight.
Yeah,
And she just
same
goes
thing.
bam, and I'm like, what?
For me, it was not that extreme. I was in the Ed Sheeran concert, and it was like people just started coming, and then the crowd became it was so full. We were all like sticking against each other, and then there was this girl that started like fighting with the other. Even though it was not physical, she didn't start punching him, but she just started yelling and screaming. Like the guy just like slightly touched her, and like he didn't have a choice. Like we were all tightly packed, and she started.
Definitely toxic.
I was
Yeah,
shaking
that's
my head, and I'm like,
unnecessary.
ugh.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's completely unnecessary.
Any final points, Sami? We need to wrap up. I feel like we're at time.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just kind of wrapping it up in terms of, because these things are on a spectrum, right? And what I think is happening is that it's a liberal sort of century we've been through, right? From institutions and customs that we're trying to move left and open up and liberalize. But at the same time, people are moving maybe too much left, and people are responding
There's a
by going
reaction.
too much right.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. And there's this theory about horseshoe theory of like at the extremes, people actually exhibit the same characteristics. So the extremes actually conform and they look much closer to each other.
Similar.
It's called the horseshoe
Interesting.
theory.
Yeah.
It's political, obviously.
They're both radicalized.
It's radicalized and they start to look the same.
Similar.
Yeah.
So this is where we are. And we always say this, life's about balance. But how do you achieve that balance? The way you guys said, like self-awareness, communication, openness,
Curiosity.
being vulnerable,
Empathy.
and so on. Empathy as well.
Yeah.
So
So I would say also men, don't be afraid to tap into your feminine energy. Women, don't be afraid to tap into your masculine energy. Make sure you balance both of them because they both have a lot of value.
yeah, and we need each
Agreed.
Yeah.
other. I think we need each other. Life
Definitely, or
depends on it.
we'll go extinct as
Yeah,
humans.
it depends
Yeah.
on it. We're
Yeah.
not competing
Yeah.
with each other. I don't think men want to compete with women in that sense. You can compete specifically context-wise for a job. That's fine.
Yeah.
But as a society, I don't think we're competing.
Yeah.
There's
It's
a
not a
reason why
competition.
Mother Nature made us this way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we
Yeah.
serve a
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah, but we've reached here together.
Yes.
So let's continue.
Let's
together.
continue. Don't
It's the
kill
only
each
way.
other.
It's only one
We're
way.
all in this together.
We're all in this
Yeah.
together.
Yeah,
so-
absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a great conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah, it's
Seline.
been
Thank
great.
you, Mahreen.
Yeah.
This is
Do you
awesome.
wanna
Thank you,
tell
guys.
people where they can find you, Seline?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you can find my podcast at selinechenoy.com.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mahreen?
And you can find my podcast, Karak with Mahreen, anywhere you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube as well.
Okay. Yeah, we'll add your tags on the video, and yeah, please give us your comments, check it out, and
Thank you for
take it
having
easy.
us.
Thank
And
you
if
both.
you're offended by anything we say, please take it with a grain of salt.